All right, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here on a Saturday morning at 10:25. We are here with Dr. Lindsay Wayland. My apologies if I say anything incorrect. Talking about organizing and engaging your percussionists in the middle school and high school band setting. She comes to us from many years of experience in Henderson, Nevada, roughly about 20 years. With the background in music education, bachelor's in music education, master's in percussion performance from the University of California, and a doctorate in percussion performance from UNLV. Rock on, Dr. Whalen, thank you. And most recently, her high school percussion ensemble won first place in the Percussive Arts Society's Western Day of Percussion in Fresno, California. Rock on. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Whalen. My name is Mary Holzclaw. I will be in the background. I work at the Nevada Department of Education in the Office of Teaching and Learning. So I will be in the background if you have any questions. And I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Whalen.
All right. So we'll get the presentation up here. So like she said, I've been doing this for a long time. And one of the things that I have definitely learned is everyone's situation is different. And so today my goal is to hopefully give you a little bit of direction, maybe answer some questions, and give you some tools to use that might be useful for your program. And we'll definitely have some time for questions at the end because I know everyone's program is very unique. So let's start with a few things that we are going to cover today. So the first thing is building a culture. And I believe that in our band rooms, we build cultures, right? And it's important to build certain cultures in your percussion section and to set up expectations that way. We'll talk about how to manage your gear and your personnel because let's be honest, percussion gear ends up everywhere. We'll talk about how to assign parts, and I have some philosophy on that. And then we'll talk about what to do with those percussionists while you're doing your full band warm-ups. And I also have a few ideas of some maybe non-traditional ways to engage percussionists so they are learning their craft and not becoming problems, because we all know that a kid left without a job can become a problem. So let's start with how to build a culture. So who are your percussionists? And I'm sure you are probably thinking in your head of the kids that stand in the back of your band room. Sometimes we get percussionists who are, let's just say, not the model students. Sometimes they're drawn to hitting stuff and want to hit stuff. So, you know, I was one of those kids. I've worked with those kids. So knowing who you have back there, we also have the super smart bookworm kids back there that want to do everything perfectly. Type A students make great percussionists. So a lot of the time we worry about keeping our students in time, especially percussion. They're the metronome, they're the whatever, but I also like to say that they need to be on time and in time. So depending on your setup, the high school, I currently work at Foothill High School, and we have multiple bands that rehearse at one time. But the problem is all the percussion gear is in one room, so that means kids have to move gear before, you know, they're even ready to play. So allowing that time or having some sort of system in place that kids can get in, get the gear. Maybe they just have a stick bag that this is the concert band stick bag. We get everything at once. But also setting up that expectation that, yes, you guys have a different job to do, but that's no excuse to be late, right? You need to be moving with purpose, setting up your gear, just like the bassoon player who has to take their instrument out of the case and put it together and get their reed prepared and be in their chair. Percussionists need to be on time. And once again, that starts with us as band directors, allowing this space and figuring out what that looks like. Now, this also applies to the end of our rehearsal. You know, sometimes we teach bell to bell, and we don't always allow that time for gear to be put away. Trumpet players have it easy, pull that mouthpiece out, trumpet in the case, they're gone. But if we allow time for percussionists to put gear away, and it's not, they don't need a lot, they don't need as much as they think they do. But if we allow that time, then once again, we build that culture of respect, which is what we're moving into next, but respect for the art of playing percussion. And I think that sometimes what we lose is that some people, especially kids, want to say, oh, I just have sticks and I hit stuff. That's what I do, I hit stuff. But remembering that percussion is so much more, right? It adds so much to a piece of music and also to craft. So building that culture from the start with them, and knowing that it's not just hitting stuff and it's not just being in time, but it's also worrying about the quality of sound we make. Just like your clarinet player, your trombone player, whomever, it's the quality of sound. You can make awful sounds on snare drums. You can make beautiful sounds, right? You can make awful sounds on timpani. Really, you can make awful sounds on any percussion instrument. So it's knowing the difference between a good bass drum sound versus just an in-time bass drum sound. So then that kind of goes with the respect for the section, but also the respect for the instruments. When kids have ownership over instruments and there's pride in those instruments, they are much more willing to take care of them, right? If you say, this is a marimba and it, you know, some kids, oh, it costs a lot of money, or, you know, we only have one, or not every school has one of whatever it is. And you say, this is here for you to use. And if it's broken, you don't get to use it, right? If you trash it, you don't have it. Building that ownership of gear and their job and their role within the ensemble, I believe, is where all of our problems and our solutions start. So if we don't have that positive culture, we have problems, right? And I've been in the back of the ensemble as a percussionist, I've been in the front of the ensemble as a conductor. And I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it's like, I don't even know what's going on back there in the jungle. Like they're just hitting things, and there's percussion music everywhere and there's sticks on the floor. And it's hard. It's hard to manage all of that, especially when you have a whatever size ensemble in front of you, and the clarinets are out of tune and the trumpets are emptying their spit valves on the floor, right? So if we start with these students at a young age and start to build that culture, the solutions start to take care of themselves. Is it overnight? No, no, it is not. But I think it's a good place to go. Also, terminology matters, and this is not a personal pet peeve of mine, but I've heard it from a number of percussion educators and professionals. They hate it when people refer to the toy box. Just get some toys and play them, right? And I do think it starts to countermine that we are musicians. We don't just hit stuff. And so there's a difference between instruments versus toys. And once again, the way we refer to things and to people matters. So I thought that was interesting. When I heard that, I started thinking about it. But, wow, I guess that's a good point. I myself will stop calling them toys. So back to managing all of that stuff, because percussion comes with a lot of stuff. It really does. And depending on your program, if you're teaching middle school or high school, you might have more or less stuff. But whatever it is, you're going to have stuff. And it needs to go. So my first suggestion is to find an organization method that A is manageable. Because if it's not manageable, you won't keep up on it, and your students won't keep up on it, right? If it's like all of the orange jam blocks have to be over here, and it's not going to happen, right? So something that is manageable, works for you, is easy, okay? Empower your students with the ownership of, this is the place where the cajon goes. This is the place where the tambourine goes. You need to put it here. When you're done with it, you need to pull it out. And then also, I always tell my kids, if something breaks, don't just put it in, right? Bring it to me, because we hit stuff. We do. We hit it and make good sounds, but we hit stuff, and percussion instruments break, right? Even when used properly, they break. So if something's broken, bring it to me, because then I can fix it, right? In the organization, if something's missing, I'm going to assume it's gone. And then I'm on the hunt for the tambourine, and I want to know where our tambourine is. And if someone walked off with it, then I'm questioning it. We just put it away, then there it is. And then it's ready for the next class. It's ready for you tomorrow. So a few examples. I work at a large high school where we have multiple directors, and we have a percussion program that has been established over many years. So we have lots of stuff, right? And here are a couple pictures from our percussion area where we store things. You can see that I believe a parent built this thing on the left. And I'm not gonna lie, during COVID shutdown, pulled everything off there, tried to clean it, paint it. The thing almost fell apart. Like, it's nothing fancy. It's some plywood and some 2x4s nailed together by some parents. And attached to the wall so it doesn't fall over and kill us all, right? And we put some paint on it so it looked nicer. All of the totes that you see there are like vibraphone mallets and marimba mallets, and they're labeled with tape right on there. So kids know, right? And so this also saves me as a band director, a percussion director, when I'm in front of an ensemble and I say, hey, you need to go get a bass drum mallet. The kid doesn't go, well, where is that? Or they're not searching for it in theory. Believe me, it doesn't always work. Even with this level of organization, it doesn't always work. But at least they know where to start, right? And I am definitely a fan of labeling things. It takes some work on the front end, but it saves so much on the back end. Also, sometimes kids don't know what a certain instrument is, right? Especially our young ones. And they're afraid to ask. But if it's labeled right there, oh, that's a cuica. Don't know why we need a cuica, but now I know what it is. I know that it's right there. If I ever need one, right? Or I know that the maracas live there. Or sometimes I'll just put them in things that shake, right? It doesn't even have to be specific. My maracas, my shakers, my little eggs, maybe a kabasa. They all kind of go together in how they make a sound. It's logical. Kids start to understand where to put stuff. And then on the right, you see we have a rack next to that. It's also labeled with the snare drums. We have the stands. They all go in there. And then the drum sets are stacked on top because we just don't have a lot of floor space for those to live set up. And this is a progression. And you're seeing this right now when it's all put away. And it doesn't always look like this. But the cool thing I noticed last year on that ownership piece was that I had students who had maybe their last period of the class free, but they were sticking around for after school rehearsals. And they would go in and go, oh, Dr. Wheeler, the percussion room is a mess. I'm going to go clean it up. Right. Because that was their space that they lived in, and they knew where everything went. So it was a matter of picking up that snare stand and breaking it down and putting it away, or putting the cymbals back in bags. It made their job much easier. And then they would come to class the next day and be like, okay, guys, clean the percussion room. You have to put stuff away now. I don't want to do that again, you know? but I never had to say, go clean percussion. The kids started to take ownership of it. And once again, you know your kids. You know the ones who are going to do that, and maybe the ones you can encourage to help, whatever it is. So that's my high school setup. I also have a colleague in one of my theaters who teaches middle school. So she has the same kind of racks. She has all the beginning bell kits that fit in there. The kids know where their slot is. They're numbered. They go in, they get them at the beginning of class, bring them out in the band room, set them up, pack them up and put them away at the end of the day. Hopefully take them to practice. And then she also has the snare drums that they use for their pet band. Right now, she has a closet on the other side of the room that stores all of the things that are currently being used. This is just the things that the students need to access. And so they're organized, they're out of the way, and the kids know where they're putting stuff. Once again, the more you can empower those kids to be responsible, the better your life will be, right? And I think sticks are probably one of the biggest issues, right? Like you just find one and it's like stuck in the wall, or it's rolling across the floor, or you open up a cupboard and they fall out. So having those stick bags that you can maybe label, these are the timpani mallets, these are the snare sticks, or if you have different ensembles, this is for this band, and everything goes back in here. And if I find it on the floor, you have to earn it back. I've had some band directors do that, right? It lives in my office until you earn it back. So some things like that, depending on what works with your program and that rapport you have built with your kids. So once we have all the stuff more or less organized, and believe me, it's kind of organized chaos at best, right? Let's just be honest about that. But as long as we know where that chaos should be, roughly, we're off on the right foot. Let's talk about assigning parts, because I think this is one of the things that, as a director, here's the flute part. Flutes play the flute part, okay? Assigning parts, there's a couple different ways to do it. My philosophy is that all percussion students we see should be able to play mallets and should be able to play snare. And then we move into, timpani, bass drum, whatever those auxiliary percussion instruments are as they move through their years in the program. Now, you're going to have kids that love playing mallet parts. Maybe they have piano background, maybe whatever it is. And you'll have kids that love playing snare parts, right? But I think it's important that they can at least function on those two main instruments. And so I will intentionally sometimes, especially in percussion ensemble, take my marimba players and say, here's a really easy snare quartet. We're going to work on it together. So that if you ever got handed a snare part, you would at least know where to start, right? And so am I going to take the hardest marimba part, bell part, and hand it to my kid who hates playing bells? No, that's just a recipe for fights and unhappy people. But I'm going to try to empower them. So maybe I'm going to set them up with someone else, right? So in general, I like to assign my parts. I have the time to do it. I found that if I leave it to kids, even my well-intentioned section leaders will go, well, that person's not good at that instrument. I'm not going to put them up there. I'm like, yeah, but they need to learn how to play it. Okay. So I try to assign my parts and then I hand that off to my section leaders. This is kind of what I do. It's a very simple Google Sheets. I put the kids in my ensemble on the left. I put the title of the piece across the top, and then I go through and figure out who's playing what, right? Now, I have a ton of percussionists. This is actually just percussion for one of the bands. And so you'll notice they're all playing on one piece. We have an interesting setup at Foothill where we have 4 band directors, and we all teach band first period, and then we teach other things, the other I actually teach orchestra. I have a teacher who teaches guitar, teach music appreciation, film studies, all that stuff. So my role is to facilitate percussion happening in the bands and then run percussion ensemble. So I've assigned these kids one piece in band, so they all get a chance to play in band, and the rest of the time they're percussion ensemble with me. Now I create this document and then I print it, multiple copies of it, and I hang it on walls in the percussion room, right next to all the gear they're going to need. I give it to my section leaders. I keep it with all of my scores. So when they go, well, why isn't so-and-so playing timpani? Who's supposed to play timpani? Boom, it's supposed to be this person right here. Okay. And that just simplifies things when you're trying to figure out why isn't the triangle being played? Oh, it's because Susie plays triangle and Susie's not here today, but she has the part and she normally does a really good job, but so-and-so is going to play it today. So like I said, I assign parts and then hand over that leadership to my students. Now let's back up to the beginning of our ensemble experience and talk about the warm-up. Sometimes if we have elaborate percussion setups, they're going to need more time to set up. And so sometimes if you're okay with it, having them continue setting up quietly while you're warming up your winds and brass, sometimes that has to happen, right? We only have so much time during the day. Those kids are coming from another class, they're going to another class. So we're kind of stuck in this rigid time. But if they need to play the marimba, it's already sitting in the middle of the room, all they need to do is pull out mallets. They don't need a lot of time to set up, right? So depending on what you're doing for warm-ups, depends on what you can do with your percussionists. If you're using a method book, depending on your method book, sometimes they have really great percussion parts. Some have snare parts, mallet parts. Those are most typical. I've even seen some method books with timpani parts or like castanet parts, so kids start to learn those instruments. If you're running scales with your band, heck yes, your percussionist should be on mallet instruments and playing those scales because they need to learn them too, right? They need to be taught them the same time that your winds and brass are learning them. Let's talk about long tones though, because if you're doing long tones are really just not helpful for percussion, right? That's one of those times where the nature of percussion being very different from winds and brass really makes it different, right? And so I recommend pairing rudiments with your long tones, okay? You can take some simple rudiments and just put them underneath there. So if you're not sure what the rudiments are, here's the first page of them, right? We have, they're on the PAS, which is the Percussive Arts Society website. I will start with something like a paradiddle, right? So right, left. Your band is playing long tones, percussionists in the background are doing paradiddles, maybe. Etc. Right? As long as they're all together in the back and you talk about dynamic control, which should be an issue for your percussion anyway, they should understand those things. It shouldn't be distracting. It allows your winds and brass to move their air, play that long tone, but it also allows the percussion to start warming up their hands and focusing on a technique. The other one that I would say is really good is 5-stroke rolls. Right, so same thing with those long tones. It engages them and makes them feel like they have a job, like they're included, like they need to be there. It can also help keep time, which hopefully your percussionists, their timing is not their issue, right? It keeps time, it teaches them the skills that they need to learn, and it's multi-faceted in that they're engaged, they're not causing problems, and they understand their role in the band, because that's a big thing with balance right there. Right? If you have a bunch of them on drum pads or snare drums or whatever they're on, let's talk about balance because that is definitely a percussion issue that we run into. So once again, to keep them engaged, they need a job, right? They need a job. They need to be doing their warm up. Sometimes people like to have a snare tapping in the background during a warm up. Hey, that's your job today. Or on Tuesdays, it's your job, whatever that looks like. One of my biggest irks, I think, is walking into the band room and looking at all the percussion kids sitting on the floor doing homework. They're like, oh, but I have a test in next period. Great. Well, you should have studied last night because we're in band, right? And so coming up with ways, and yeah, we have to work with the flute tone, or we have to work with whatever it is, but ways that they need to stay engaged. Hey, I need you to look at the next section and maybe find the notes on your bell kit and use your fingers to touch them, right? Or maybe you need to go through and write in your accidentals. Or maybe, hey, snare drummer, you play that pattern 27 times. I need you to go in and number every 5 bars so you don't get lost. You know where the piece is, right? Different things like that that they can be doing. Sometimes some pad work on the floor. And once again, this is all what you're comfortable with in your band room, right? We have carpet in our band room. So if I had a couple kids gently playing paradiddles or something on the floor, it would overwhelm the room. So have them, give them a job, make sure they know what's going on. And then some other ways to keep them engaged. If you have someone who's maybe really good at snare drum and you're going to assign a person who maybe needs a little help, hooking them up as a mentor student. Hey, let's go out in the hall for 5 minutes and just work on how to count this rhythm. Hey, let me stand here next to you and play it with you, right? So maybe they're not going to play it on the concert, maybe they are, right? Doubling up parts, definitely a thing, especially when you have 20 billion percussionists in your ensemble, which sometimes happens. Percussion ensemble can be an issue, right? Or can be a way to continue engaging students. There are ways to do percussion ensemble, right? And if you're the only person at your school, which many of us are, I work in a very unique situation. Can you do that, after school or at lunch? Or do you have, maybe you're working at a high school and you have a senior who takes private lessons, who is really responsible, and you know them, and maybe they're going to take this group of freshmen and take them over to a neighboring room and work on a snare quartet or something they can do in practice pads, right? Once again, you know your students. There's also the option of creating a percussion only class. One of my theater programs has a small band, a couple different small bands, and her intermediate band had, I think, something like 10 percussionists in it and only 7 woodwind players. And so what she decided to do was she actually combined her intermediate and advanced winds and brass players, pulled all of the percussionists into one class and created a percussion ensemble class. So those kids are now more engaged. They have something to work on. So they work on their band music, and then they work on maybe 1 or 2 percussion ensemble pieces. And then she has a couple after school rehearsals right before the concert. So she has them playing together. And it looks a little different, but her percussionists were becoming a problem because there wasn't anything for them to do. And there are a bunch of middle school kids sitting around in the back of the band room while she's trying to get her trumpet player to make sound. And so this solution has really worked for her, and her percussionists have really grown because of that. It also helped her wins because they felt more, there were larger numbers, so they felt a little stronger, but they weren't being overwhelmed by all these percussionists in back. So try to think outside the box, ask people what they've done. Of course, you have to have your administration on board. She had to completely change kind of the band class setups and what that looked like. I'm going to get back to questions in just a minute because I want to alert you to a couple of resources that are really good. PAS.org is the Percussive Arts Society. That is an international group. If you haven't heard of Percussive Arts Society, we are an international group of percussionists, and we work towards a lot of percussion education. You can find the rudiments there. If you want, those rudiment sheets are free to print out. You can hand them out to your percussionists and be like, hey, learn this one this week, learn this group, whatever it is. So check out that website. You can just Google PAS rudiments. Also, if you are on Facebook, there is a Percussion Solutions for Band Directors Facebook group. If you're not in that group, join it. The whole idea is that there are educators, percussion educators, professional percussionists, and band directors in there. It was set up to help get real-time help. And I've seen so many pictures just this morning. Hey, my bass drum fell over and the rim broke. What do I do? Or, hey, my kid is having a problem with this technique. Here's a picture of their hand. What do I do? Hey, my carriers don't fit my kids right, and I have a game tonight. What can I do in a pinch to make it work? Right? And there are percussionists on there answering those questions. And the whole point is to be a friendly place, because percussion is a whole different beast. And as band directors, it can be a very difficult thing to work with, right? Let's be honest, your percussion methods classes cover about this much of percussion. And not even really how to teach percussion in the classroom and what to do when everything falls on the floor and everything breaks. So this Facebook group is amazing in the support of, it's okay, that's not a dumb question. I asked that question too, right? And then of course, you can always email me. Don't hesitate. I love teaching percussion and I love problem solving. And because I've been on both sides of the podium, I know what you're talking about. I've been there. So I would love to open it up for any questions you guys have. Anything I can help for you? Dr. Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Ola. Yeah, so I'm basically elementary music teacher here at CCSD. It's my 6th year in our district teaching music. Even I was like subbing for a few years, and I basically live right next to Foothill where you teach.
Oh, wonderful.
So I can hear those rehearsals every morning.
Yeah, we're out there early.
Yes, and I'm enjoying it. So my question is about beginning. So I decided this year to create marching drumming band, and I'm right now just putting kids together. If 2 years ago somebody would say me, "Oh, you will be teaching drumming," I would be just laughing at that person. But 2 years ago, I created bucket drumming band, and we became really successful. So last school year, we were leading 2 parades. We were leading Martin Luther King parade with my kids, and we were all on youth, so kids were so happy.
Yeah.
And West Side parade as well on September. So yeah, we decided to try marching drumming band this year. And so what would you recommend to start from, like, just those, because we are right now working on percussions with kids in the classroom, basically on music lessons, percussion family. So I'm preparing them by practicing all rhythm patterns, before we move to snare drums.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Marching is a whole other thing that you have to get the hands together first, and practicing with a metronome so they feel that time. And then, we start moving our feet, and maybe it's, hey, move your feet to the metronome. And then I think bringing attention to how the hands line up with the feet is important. Hey, notice how you have that right hand with your right foot or whatever it is. And sometimes I'm a very visual learner. So even drawing lines in my music with, oh, my feet land here, right? My eighth notes fall between or whatever. So find things like that that work with your kids. Keep it simple because marching involves the whole body, and especially with younger kids and ones that are growing, they're awkward already. And so trying to get their body coordinated can be difficult for them. So things that are really simple, and then just get them moving small amounts at a time, do it in small chunks. Hey, let's take, 8 steps forward, and then we're going to play in place, whatever it is. And take the small wins as big, because if you are starting a whole marching program and you get those kids to actually move and play and it sounds like something, that's exciting, and everyone should be excited about that. So
Oh
just
yeah,
keep
they're
it
all
simple.
very happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody wants to be in the band. Even I told, look, I can limit from 2nd to 5th grade, I can limit to 2 students from class because it's just impossible to get everyone. And plus we have other cool programs, after school programs in our school as well. So, I want for them to concentrate on one, not on few at the same time.
Of course. Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay, Susan. So, I will actually percussion ensemble curriculum. It depends on what you want to do. Like Ola was just saying, she started with bucket drumming. Sometimes bucket drumming is a really great entrance into things like that. There are books that you can get with bucket drumming. It's also depending on what your resources are. Buckets and sticks are a lot cheaper than a bunch of percussion gear. And even at the high school level, I did a piece last year that was buckets and trash cans and all that stuff. So that's great if you want to start a percussion ensemble or if you're trying to get more people excited. And honestly, what I'm going to recommend is if you go to the Percussion Solutions for Band Directors Facebook page, you can search threads of like percussion ensemble pieces or bucket drumming or whatever. Because there's not one that I particularly love that I can throw out there. But there are a lot of those things, and especially when, yeah, they all want to do percussion, especially when you you want to create that group, and you have to decide what you want that group to look like. Some of these bucket drumming ensembles also, they play like rock band backing tracks. And depending on what your end goal is, and you can teach good percussion technique, the fulcrum, the pinch, the motion, you can teach all of that on buckets, right? You can teach all that stuff with no problems, and you then still have something that kids are really excited about. Sometimes they don't even realize they're learning good technique, and you're like, yep. Sometimes I tell my beginners, I can have a smiley face on the back of their hand that looks at the ceiling. The kids who can't remember that, I draw a smiley face on the back of their hand, and then they all go, oh, a smiley face. Okay, fine. Whatever it is. And then the audience likes it too. It's exciting. And so for me, that's a win-win. You have kids that are learning good technique. You have kids who are excited to be there. You have parents who want to support your program. And so I think bucket drumming and other things like that are not a bad way to start. And then we branch out from there, depending on the instruments you have. Maybe it's, okay, these kids are going to play a bucket piece, and now maybe these kids are interested in doing some marimba stuff. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Stomp, there's a reason people love it. There is a reason people love it. And like I said, we did this whole bucket trash can thing, and we played it up. So we had stacked the buckets in a big kind of display on the back of the stage. Kids had like they had taken wads of paper and put them in the trash can. So they emptied them out on stage and then kind of started playing with it and experimenting. And we practiced that. And then they all, knew the cue to come into we played it in kind of an arc. But they were, experimenting and playing. And then like one group started to kind of build from there. And it wasn't too difficult. Yeah, there we go. And Fawn posted a resource they like, the bucket training. Yeah, of course. And like I said, everyone's situation is different. We all work in different places. So feel free to email me anytime. Like I grew up in Wyoming and Montana where you had tiny bands and you do what you can, and now I teach one of the largest marching programs in the state. Like I've seen a lot of it. So anything you can do, like I said, as long as you're teaching good technique, you can do that on buckets, you can do that on trash cans, you can do that on stools, right? Whatever kids are excited about hitting and playing, and you can talk about music, I'm all for it. Get those kids engaged, and get them playing. Other questions? Yeah. Susan, where are you located?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I am in the Northwest.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm at a charter school, Somerset.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I mean, anytime we have open rehearsals, so we rehearse on Tuesday nights. We
Okay.
also play at a lot of the marching competitions around town. But if anyone would ever want to drop in on a Tuesday night rehearsal, just send me an email so I'll know to watch out for you. And you guys are always welcome to come check out what we do at Foothill with our front ensemble, marching band, all that stuff.
How late does marching season go?
Our last competition is the end of October. That's when the circuit championships are. So
Okay.
we march all the way through on Tuesday nights.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, you are all welcome. Just let me know.
I've thought about doing it with UNLV, but it's been hard to make the connection.
Right. Well, I know the new director at UNLV. He's a good friend of mine. The band director who's kind of taking over the marching band. So if you want his contact info, I know he would love to have you come there as well.
Okay.
So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Do it all on a Tuesday.
Just hit them all,
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Oh yeah. Yeah, Foothill's it's a great program. It's kind of always evolving of what we have going on there. Like I said, I also teach orchestra and help with color guard. It's
Oh,
crazy.
see, we really could chat. That's me.
Yeah, it's been a crazy place to be. So it's a good place. So
That's awesome.
yeah. I think we're just about wrapped up here. But like I said, my email is there. Feel free to email me any questions. And just like on the Facebook page, I mentioned, no question is a dumb question. It really isn't. I'm a percussionist. I'm sure I've asked many dumb questions. I mean, I teach orchestra. I'm like, how do I do this? What with the, right? So no question is a dumb question. It's just something, it's just something you don't know. And so being able to help each other out and be like, no, it's okay. It's okay. This is how you do it. No judgment from me. So yeah.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Whalen?